Digoxin, Digitoxin, and Digitalis are cardiac glycosides that increase cardiac contractility and vagal tone in the heart and are used in cases of heart failure and certain arrhythmias. In this mnemonic, we'll give you a handy way to help you remember the mechanisms, uses, and side effects of these drugs for test day. It's been 10 years since the original Hangover movie was released, and to celebrate, the creators released an unused scene to the public. If you've seen the movie, then you'll recognize this digital camera. This digital camera contains photo records of the wild bachelor party that these guys just could not remember. You can use this digital camera to remember the drug names Digoxin, Digitoxin, and Digitalis, since digital starts with dig, the same prefix as Digoxin, Digitoxin, and Digitalis, right? Let's take a look at what this digital camera has captured. Okay, first things first, what is this guy doing in a banana suit? From the look on his face, it looks like he couldn't tell you how he ended up in the suit either. He's probably had more than enough drinks, but it looks like he is gearing up for another one. With salt on one hand and a lime in the other, you know that can only mean one thing. Tequila shots. Use this banana-clad man and his salted hand to remember the reversible sodium-potassium pump. Get it? Salt obviously represents sodium, and the banana represents potassium, because bananas contain a lot of potassium, right? Digitoxin, Digitalis, and Digoxin are inhibitors of the sodium-potassium pump. So what does inhibition of the sodium-potassium pump cause, you ask? Well, take a look at that lime in our banana-clad partier's hand. He's probably not in a state to realize it, but he is squeezing that thing awfully hard. Look how it's leaking juice onto the floor. You can use this firm squeeze on the lime to remember that by inhibiting the sodium-potassium pump, digoxin increases contractile strength of heart muscle. Because muscle contraction is basically just squeezing, right? This process is a bit unintuitive, so I'm going to take a moment to unpack how all this works. First, let's take a look at a sodium-potassium pump in the membrane of a cardiomyocyte. As you know already, this pump uses ATP to move 3 sodium ions out of the cell in exchange for 2 potassium ions into the cell. So by inhibiting this pump, these drugs cause sodium levels to increase inside the cell. Now by itself, this wouldn't increase contractile function, but nothing happens in isolation in the heart. There's actually a second pump involved, a sodium-calcium exchanger. This pump pushes 1 sodium ion out to bring 1 calcium ion in. By increasing sodium levels inside the cell, digoxin, digitalis, and digitoxin cause this pump to work more, bringing more sodium out of the cell in exchange for more calcium inside the cell. Remember that calcium is required for muscle contraction, since calcium binds to troponin to expose the actin binding site to myosin. So more calcium equals more contraction. Therefore, digitoxin, digitalis, and digoxin increase contractility by increasing calcium levels indirectly, by increasing sodium levels. This is a bit oversimplified, but I really think this is a useful framework to think about the mechanism of these drugs. And where did this movie take place again? Of course, it happens in Vegas. Just take a look at that Welcome to Las Vegas sign. This Vegas sign coincidentally helps me remember the vagus nerve. Get it? Vagus for vagal stimulation? This is here to help you remember that digitoxin, digitalis, and digoxin also work to stimulate the vagus nerve. You know, the 10th cranial nerve, which plays a key role in the parasympathetic or rest and digest response. Following the rest and digest scheme, stimulation of the vagal nerve slows conduction at the heart. Technically, vagal stimulation slows the pacemaker nodes of the heart, making it run slower. The end result is increased vagal tone and a slowed heart rate. Next, take a look at the man in front of our banana suit guy. In typical movie fashion, he's wearing his aviator sunglasses even though it's nighttime. Here at Pixarize, aviator sunglasses are our recurring symbol for the AV or atrioventricular node. Get it? Aviator for AV node? Digitalis and digoxin work on all nodal tissue, which obviously includes the AV node. This slows conduction through the node, which can lead to heart block in rare cases. Behind these two, we can see a pretty sweet hot tub. Look at that big heart-shaped pillow floating around in the tub and looking very soggy. This soggy heart is our symbol for heart failure. Get it? A soggy heart for heart failure? In heart failure, the heart is unable to properly pump blood out to the rest of the body. Digoxin is an important drug in treating heart failure since it increases the contractile function of the heart. By increasing the contractile strength, digoxin can help increase the stroke volume and cardiac output, thereby treating heart failure. Next, take a look at the TV behind the hot tub. I don't know whether it was the water from the hot tub or one of these inebriated bachelors, but looks like someone or something has broken this TV. Look how the screen is full of static and those weird lines going across it. Those lines kind of look like a heart rhythm, don't they? You can use the static, irregular pattern on this broken TV to remember that digoxin can be used to treat the abnormal heart rhythm seen in atrial fibrillation. Recall that in atrial fibrillation, an aberrant spot on the atria fires electrical signals extremely quickly, causing the atria to contract quickly so it looks like it is vibrating or fibrillating. The problem arises when these atrial impulses are conducted down the AV node into the ventricles, causing them to beat extremely quickly as well. Ventricles normally need time to fill, so the quick beating prevents them from filling appropriately and reduces cardiac output. Digoxin Digitalis and digoxin help by increasing vagal tone, which inhibits the conduction of impulses down the AV node, as we've already discussed. This slows the ventricular rate, giving the heart enough time to fill and do its job. In other words, these drugs work as rate control drugs in atrial fibrillation by slowing down the heart rate to give it time to fill. It's worth noting that digoxin and its counterparts are second line after beta blockers. Why is that? We'll discuss next. The reason why digoxin and its related drugs aren't preferred for AFib has much to do with its side effect profile. Yep, take a look at the third friend in the photo. He seems to be having way less fun than the others. Yes, it looks like their wild night has caught up with him, and now he's throwing up out of the window of their penthouse. This guy throwing up out of the window helps me remember that digoxin has a very narrow therapeutic window. This means that there's a super short range of doses where digoxin works well. Too little and you don't get a clinical benefit. Too much and you get toxic effects. Let's move on to discuss a few high-yield adverse effects seen in Digitox. Let's look back at our guy in aviator glasses. Instead of opting for the classic color of shades, this guy wanted to make a statement by buying aviators with yellow-tinted lenses. So fashion-forward. Use these yellow lenses to remember that patients on digoxin can experience disturbed color vision where they may see yellow halos around objects. Notice what this guy in shades is doing. Looks like he's cutting off his banana friend, preventing him from having any more drinks. Finally, at least there's one person at this party trying to be responsible. Use this image of this guy in aviators blocking his friend to remember that patients on digoxin may experience AV block. Get it? Since part of digoxin's function is to slow conduction through the AV node, it should make sense how digoxin toxicity can lead to AV block. Finally, patients taking digoxin can experience more nonspecific GI side effects, such as nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, as well as nonspecific neurologic symptoms such as fatigue, confusion, and weakness. Patients on digoxin may also become hyperkalemic and can be given magnesium to stabilize them. These are pretty nonspecific and are less high yield than the ones we've just discussed. Now that we've talked about the effects of digoxin toxicity, let's talk about how they can be reversed. Take a look at that light fixture on the ceiling. Unique, isn't it? The Y shape of this light fixture kind of resembles an antibody, doesn't it? Since antibodies are Y-shaped, like this light. You can use this antibody-shaped light fixture to remember that digoxin toxicity can be treated with anti-digoxin Fab fragments. Fab fragments are just the part of an antibody that binds to stuff. So these anti-digoxin Fab fragments can bind to and help eliminate digoxin when a patient is experiencing toxicity. So, treat digoxin poisoning with anti-digoxin antibodies. Makes sense, right? That's it for this scene on digoxin. Let's review what we've learned. Cardiac glycosides, including digoxin, digitalis, and digitoxin, are drugs that work in two ways. First, they can inhibit the sodium-potassium pump in the heart, causing sodium levels to rise. This increased sodium level inside the cell indirectly activates a sodium-calcium exchanger to bring more calcium into the cell. More calcium causes more contractility in cardiac muscle. This increased contractility is useful in the treatment of heart failure. Second, digoxin can increase vagal tone, which acts mainly on the pacemaker SA and AV nodes to slow conduction. By slowing conduction down the AV node, digoxin is a useful drug in rate control for atrial fibrillation. Note that these drugs are rarely administered first line, mainly due to their narrow therapeutic windows. Patients taking these drugs often experience toxicity, which includes symptoms like disturbed color vision, AV heart block, as well as nonspecific GI and neurological symptoms. I hope you've enjoyed this bonus scene. I'll see you next time.